Hello, listeners. Welcome to the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon podcast. So, if you've been listening, we've been talking to business leaders around Asia. So, today we have CJ Ng with us, who is a specialist in China. And if you're watching this on video, you might be able to see his matching shirt and his book at the back. So, he's actually an executive coach. And well, I was just talking to him. He actually moved back to Singapore as of 2020. He's an executive business coach and trainer. So today we'll talk a little bit about training as well. And as you can see, he is the author of the book, Winning the B2B Sale in China. So a lot of questions maybe I want to ask about China as well. And of course, he's also the co-creator of something called the Sales Map, which we'll get to as well. CJ, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, CJ. All right. So for all my guests, so CJ actually replied to me today and asked me about this. But for all my guests, I'll ask the first question, which is, what is your favorite Kung Fu movie?
Well, as much as I like Crouching Tiger and Hidden Dragon, that's not my number one. My number one is Donnie Yen one. It's not Ip Man. It's way earlier. It's called Flashpoint, 导火线. It's the one that has extensive use of lots of MMA, lots of wrestling moves, grappling and hitting and all that way before John Wick was popular. So that's Donnie Yen in his prime.
Yes, I think I've watched that movie. That is, yeah. Even before Ip Man, which is the Donnie Yen is famous for. Do you happen to know the English title of that
Flashpoint.
Flashpoint, yeah, Flashpoint. Yeah. Oh, okay, Flashpoint. Yes, I think I've watched it. It is Donnie Yen at his peak.
Yes.
peak
Donnie
physical.
and Colin Chow. So Colin Chow acted in Matrix as well as one of the Chinese guys in Matrix. And he's usually the baddie in lots of Chinese kung fu dramas. So yes, and then those two guys at their peak.
Do you briefly remember the storyline? Okay,
Cop,
basically fighting bad guys. I know that's
fighting bad guys
as gangsters. Maybe I'll check out for the listeners. Yeah.
The thing about is you watch this kind of movies not because of the plot.
Same with John Wick. Maybe. But this is before John Wick. So for the listeners, check out Flashpoint. Donnie Yen, Ip Man has been mentioned many times on the pod.
Yeah.
Donnie Yen has been mentioned many times on the pod as well. So thank you, CJ, for sharing that with us. And CJ, actually, if you look through his LinkedIn profile, spent a good number of time in China. And today he's back in Singapore for this interview. So can you tell us a bit about your journey? How, from your career, I know you work as a trainer and now you're a coach and also an independent trainer as well. So tell us more about your journey.
Well, my journey was in tour for I went to China and someone people always ask me why you went to China and my response is because I couldn't find a job in Singapore. The thing was that I started as a trainer with one of the government agencies in Singapore. If we got Singapore listeners, it's People's Association. It's a training school at the South Buona Vista Road, all that tucked in the corner of that. So that's where I started. And I found that, if I want to grow as a trainer and there's no hard skills, there are people who are trained engineers, there are people who are trained programmers, there are people who are trained something. And I got no hard skills to complement my soft skills as a trainer. So I thought it's better for me to take a detour and go into corporate and do something else before coming back as a trainer. So I took up a sales job and selling e-commerce solutions and what I call IT systems integrations and selling all those kind of things. And then in tour for we got a friend, I think, who's famous guy in Malaysia, KCC. So he's got a JV in Shanghai and say, hey, I got this thing in Shanghai. Would you like to come over and have a look? And I thought have a look means relocating. So that's my misinterpretation. So I literally uproot everything and just went there, lock, stock, barrel. And it turns out that the Chinese partner, the Shanghainese partner, prefers someone locally for obvious reasons. They're cheaper. They know the local market and so on. So if I were to be in their shoes, I also want to work with someone local. So there I was uprooting everything and relocated in China, but the partner says we like to have someone local. So it was like left dangling there. So what did I do? I tried a few freelancing, but it didn't work out because I really didn't know the local market. So I went back to the corporate world within China and found people who are hiring sales trainers in-house for what is then known as Switzerland's largest media group, Ringier. So they're for the arm in China. So that's how we worked out. And part of the profile was we were working with industrial publications. So it's not a usual magazines that you find in cafes and what you buy. We're talking about magazines. Those days, we didn't have that much of online print materials. Everything is still paper-based. So we've got magazines on molding, on industrial automation. Doesn't sound very sexy, but there are magazines that run all of those, and we sell ad spaces for that. We talk to the marketing and salespeople of those type of companies. So that allowed me to have exposure with what is sales on an industrial scale. What is really B2B selling? Not just the B2B that sells to distributors, but the B2B that is really hardcore industrial stuff, industrial equipment, industrial parts and solutions, right? So that's the exposure that I had, and a couple of years later, I was in a different job and I was kind of restructured out because the company had a JV with someone else, with a state-owned company, and they found that there are lots of duplicate positions. So since the focus of that merger of the M&A was to grow the Chinese business, so I'm not really focused on Chinese businesses, so they prefer someone who knows the local market again. And me being the marketing guy for Asia, I was restructured out. So there I was being paid some money to get out, and I was expecting my first child, my first son, and it's like, should I find a job or should I try my hand to do something on my own? And now I got some seed capital, not a lot, but good enough for half a year. So that's how it all started for me to go really full time into coaching and training and facilitation.
Thank you, CJ. So today, do you work mostly with companies in China? I see on your LinkedIn that you travel to China quite often.
Yes. So the thing is that to me, China is like Hotel California. You know, you can come anytime you want, but can never leave. And that's for me. So I spend like
Mercedes Benz as well.
Yeah, I spent like 16 years over there. It's like lots of context, a lot of business context over there. So even during COVID, for people who are familiar with or who are familiar with the news of China had a zero COVID policy for 3 years, from 2020 till early 2023. So there was a time when if I were to go, I could go back, but I need to go with 14-day quarantine, and at different stages the lockdown were really bad. So even in those very challenging situations, I was still in touch with China. Either we went on online workshops, or we consolidate everything together, that I flew in and had a 14-day quarantine and get whatever I need to do done after that, or we work with associate facilitators who are based in China. So yeah, and even though I'm now away from China in that sense, that 16 years of you can call it cultivation or relationship building stuck with me.
Yes. And which part of China, may I ask?
Yeah, I was in Shanghai. Most of the time in Shanghai, but the clients are like can be anywhere. I think 60% of what we do are centered around Shanghai, and another 20% are the surrounding areas around Shanghai, and then you got other parts of China.
All right, so thank you, CJ, and let's address the elephant in the room. So the book behind you.
Yep.
So maybe let's start with that. And what is the difference? How is B2B sales? So it's called the book behind. So winning the B2B sale in China. So how is B2B sales different in China?
um, it's the same idea where we say it's same but different in that sense. So B2B sales in terms of frameworks are very similar anywhere in the world. It's a multiple stage approach. You don't close a sale after you did something very impressive and the customer says, "I love it. Can I buy it now?" Doesn't happen that way. It's going to be multiple stages. You will also get to see different people, not just one person. You see different people, and people will say that, oh, it's more of a rational decision. But at the back of their minds, people are always afraid of making mistakes, afraid of taking on risks. So there's also a large part of an emotional element in it disguised as a rational decision. So those are kinds of things that happens everywhere in the world. And by the way, I've worked with salespeople not just in China. I've worked with salespeople in Southeast Asia, in Japan, Korea, even in the US or India, Australia as well. So those there are slight differences, but not a lot. Now the thing about China is that no, for a lot of Western countries, some people don't get it that why is it that people in China, in order to make a sale, we must have makan, we must sit down, eat something, drink something. It's like we need to go out and have a meal somehow. It's not to do, and a lot of people tend to think that it's got to be decadence. It's got to be you guys just want to have an excuse to go to the KTV and have a good time, a rowdy time, and that's not really that. And sometimes it's just a decent meal in a decent restaurant, and that's it. There's a lot of people who like to build trust before they go for the sale. People will like to know, who am I dealing with, and can I trust this person to get whatever done before we go to the next step. And how do we build trust? And then there are various ways of building trust. But for two strangers, and one of them is trying to make a buck from you, it's hard to build trust in that scenario. And one of the ways is that let's get out of the office, let's go to somewhere else, let's have a meal. And if I were to know where you grew up, which school you went to, how many kids you have, where are your kids studying, and so on. So the more we get to know each other, even if it's not related to the sale itself, the higher the trust we tend to build, right? So that's part of it, and then there's a misconception in both the East and the West about that guanxi thing, that relationship thing. They tend to think that the East tend to think about you need to grease the wheels. That guanxi means you kowtow to your customer and just do as they please. It's not the case. It's just about building trust. And the West will also think likewise. Guanxi means some kind of corruption or non-compliance in place, and it's not that sense either. So somewhere in between, and it's really, if it boils down the relationship to its core, it's really about building trust in one way or the other.
Yeah, thank you, CJ. Yes, I've seen some of these meetings, these meals with a lot of food on the table, and yeah, maybe could you share with us the story of Charlie? So in your Amazon page for your book, you mentioned this person called Charlie. So
Yes.
maybe to let the listeners understand what you mean, maybe share that story here as well.
Okay, that is based on a real story. So I think just make sure I'm talking about the right story. So Charlie was the one that thinks that I got everything settled. I'm actually giving offering this person some goodies, some under the table stuff, and I got everything covered, and that it is based on a true story, and that actually turned out pretty badly for Charlie and for everyone involved, because he
So yeah, a bit of context. So Charlie is someone from the West. and
Oh,
he
someone from China actually. So it's just,
someone from China. Okay, okay,
yeah. So
that's
it's a
fine.
Chinese salesperson that thought
Yeah.
that if I bribe the customer will buy from me. So that's the old style of working,
Yeah.
and it backfired very badly. And this is a real story that I witnessed. Some salespeople thought that by greasing the wheels and doing something on table and give some goodies to the customer, and it turns out that the customer had either it's politically driven or just good governance. They're under a lot of scrutiny on people taking bribes of one way or the other. So the person getting those gifts are very concerned, as in rather not to be in that spotlight of receiving anything, whether it's
Mm.
a deal, a gift, or whatever, an iPhone or whatever. I'd rather not be in that spotlight because a lot of people are now kind of cracking down or even witch hunting for this question. And again, it may or may not be a long-term thing for the company to have good governance. It could be just at that point that the powers that be says, we should cut all this, we should be strict about whatever we are doing. It may just last for 3 months, and after 3 months, everything goes back to the old normal. We don't know, but at that point when this Charlie was doing it, he did it at the wrong time, and the guy was like, no, no way. Although it may seem like I have a family to feed, I need to buy a house, and housing in Shanghai was like straight up the roof. Although it may seem like I need the cash, but in that context that I'm operating in, a no, and it's going to screw my career left, right, and center, right? So it really hit people really bad, and the reason I put on Amazon is that the perception of selling in China is about guanxi, and guanxi is going to be misperceived as you need to give some under the table things for customers, and it's not the case most of the time. There are still exceptions for sure, but in most of the situations, it's not the case because China's economy has evolved so much that when people are spending money and buying something, they want the good stuff. They don't want to end up buying something that does not work for them. So if you want to grease the wheel and then bring them to KTV and have a good time, if your company allows that, to the customer, they will say, yeah, sure, why not? But that will not be the basis of making the decision. The decision is your product, your solution needs to work in the first place. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Yeah, China has it's evolved since, and right now it has a lot of the law, and it's more advanced in many ways as well. So like in Singapore and also in Malaysia, we use for B2B sales, we use LinkedIn a lot. Right. So
Yes.
this is a question I didn't ask you initially, but what do they use in China? Do they use WeChat or what
Oh,
they?
it's getting tougher because LinkedIn, when the book was written, LinkedIn was still available in China in its full format. And then I think shortly after the book was published, a few months later, LinkedIn became a crippled version of LinkedIn in China, and now it's totally out of China.
I remember working with a client in Shanghai, and they had the logo is Ling Ying in
Yeah,
Chinese. So
yeah,
I love
yes,
that.
yeah.
I love that name.
Yeah,
And
and
now it's no more. And what channels is
Um,
are?
it's very tough because there are no really good alternatives for social media that is really useful for lead generation. So yes, a lot of people use WeChat, which is the WhatsApp equivalent for China with more bells and whistles, with more um, functionalities. But just like WhatsApp, you need to know the other person in order to link that. You can theoretically publish there are so-called official accounts, official pages. So WeChat is like WhatsApp with some Facebook kind of utilities built in. So you can have your own pages and publish them pages. on WeChat, and those pages may be circulated beyond the people you know, but it's a bit hit and miss. And there are no hard and fast easy way to kind of replace LinkedIn. There are some so-called B2B social media in China, but none of them are big enough or good enough for corporate usage. And none of them are even good enough for hiring, for recruiters. So yeah, it's just a shame that this it's just an entire void, and we're back to the old days of cold calling and colder approaches or physical networking.
Yes, yeah, maybe there's an opportunity there for Chinese social B2B social media. So yeah, on LinkedIn, your headline says shared leadership team
Yeah.
coach.
Yes.
So moving on from China, can you share with us what does shared leadership
Well,
team?
shared leadership, team coaching. I mean, team coaching is getting traction these days. It's so much traction that ICF, the coaching certification body, has now a new certificate of team coaching. Right. So in a way, the thing about ICF, it's really a really well-oiled money-making machine. They know how to make money for members. So one of the ways to make money for them is really to come up with a new certification. And that is so besides the usual in coaching, in ICF terminology, you got level one, that is associate coach, ACC, and then you got a professional coach or professional certified coach, and so on and so forth. Then they got a separate category called for certified team coach, right? So ICF has that for certification, and shared leadership coaching is one of the schools that, or one of the methodologies of how to do team coaching. So I'm certified under that methodology to do shared leadership team coaching, and in public, I'd like to say that I'll be working towards my ICF certification as well for the team coaching part. But then again, sometimes too much work gets in the way. So when I can get around to get those things done, I don't know, but it's something to work towards. Yeah.
All the best for that as well. Yeah, so when it comes to maybe coaching teams or helping companies with B2B sales, is there
Yeah.
any examples or any stories that you'd like to share?
Well, one of the cases that we did, and this is even before I was certified as a coach, was we did some cross-cultural integration for a very unique company. I'm not going to name the company name, but if you know your car brands well, you know who they are, right? So this is a American company that used to be part of a German company, and then they split from a German company again, and now they are kind of married or merged with an Italian company, right? So American company merged with an Italian company, car company. So you figure out, and as it is. The Americans think that this is the way we've been doing things. We are right, and then everybody else is wrong. So goes for the Italians or the Europeans. So this is the way, the European way, the Italian way of doing things, and everything else is wrong. And now if it's solely in the US and if it's solely in Europe, they'll just go their various things. They're less of the intersection. But then they ended up in China. So they've got plants in China, they've got distributorships in China, they've got offices in China. So you got three distinct cultures. You got the Americans, you got the Italians or Europeans, and then you got the Chinese. And the Americans are not really gelling well and not really working well with the Italians, and vice versa. And the Chinese people are the ones who are being trampled all over. Right, yeah, the messenger between the two. So what we did was an invention to really make all three parties understand where the other person is coming from. Why do they do certain things in a certain way? Why they say certain things in a certain way? How do you see things from their point of view? How do you style switch or adapt the styles to their styles, or how you make them understand that there could be a better way of working around things. So in a way that helped them to resolve a lot of unnecessary conflicts, and then really help them to in a way, it's really to help the Europeans and Americans to see eye to eye where in their respective HQs they couldn't.
Yes, it sounds interesting. It sounds like three cultures
Yes.
coming together there. So I
Yes.
imagine the Italian culture, American, and the Chinese culture is something hard to navigate as well.
It's hard, yeah.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. And I know that you're in sales training as well. And I think you recently wrote, so there are a lot of sales trainings out there. There's like things I see like NLP. There's so many things. So like like in your view, like how do you make your sales training more effective?
Right, and I'm glad you mentioned about there are many styles and many schools of sales training. And since we're talking about Crouching Tiger and Hidden Dragon, I'm going to talk about Bruce Lee, right? So this one, it's if you're younger, you talk about Donnie Yen. If you're older like me, we talk about Bruce Lee. So and one thing about what Bruce Lee said is it's not the schools or the styles that matter. It's the martial artist himself or herself that matters. It's not about the styles of the selling. It's about how to use it to your benefit and how to use it to work with customers. So it's really the salesperson that matter rather than the style of selling. And how I mean by that is this: in in sales, it's always about finding out what the customer wants or what concerns the customer might have. It's everything that's revolving around a customer, or sometimes the customer may not even know what they really want. And the salesperson's job is to somehow find ways to kind of help guide the customer, or help the customer to realize that, hey, actually I really want a certain kind of outcome. So that's about the sales, but especially for a business to business kind of sale. In a business to business context, people are not buying certain things because I love it, I like it, I feel good about it. In a B2B setting, people are buying because I need to use certain kind of products into my production, into my business processes, and then I make it into something else, and then I can sell it to my customer. So it's not just buying something and I use it. I buy something, do something else, and then sell it again to my customer. That's B2B. So there needs to be some justification internally of why am I buying this? Why is it good for me? How is it going to help me sell better to my customer? How is it going to be better to help me streamline my operations, or improve my quality, or do something? So there's got to be certain justifications in certain way that are somehow tied to some business needs. So that's those sort of things that no matter which school of thought you are, if you're selling B2B, you need to get to the root of that, and only then are you able to sell better to your customers.
So getting right down to the business needs, no matter what style it is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you've trained people in China, and as you mentioned, in around Asia as well,
Yeah.
in Korea, Japan. So
Yeah.
what do you feel are the differences in terms of selling in like all these Asian countries?
Well, I also, again, it's various cultures, and it sounds weird, but actually there are quite a huge amount of cultural nuances that are different between the different countries, and the main one is the hierarchical thought. So let's say Southeast Asia, Thailand, Indonesia sometimes as well. In Thailand, in Indonesia, if you want to challenge your customer by asking a challenging question, it's really difficult, both from a salesperson's point of view and from the customer's point of view. They're very steep into culturally thinking about, you need to there needs to be a lot of deference to the customer or to someone more senior. So if your customer, for whatever reasons, it's not about seniority in rank, but maybe just someone who is older in age, you gotta have that sense of that deference to them, and to a certain extent in South Korea as well, that there is more hierarchical view in that sales approach. You may expect that in China, but China, surprise, surprise, is actually less hierarchical, and to a certain extent, sometimes even less hierarchical than, say, Malaysia. Just a case in point. I mean, it's hierarchical, and also China is more direct in the way they say things. If I like, I say I like. If I don't like, I say I don't like. I just call a spade a spade. Just case in point. Nothing to do with sales, but just something to do with training. And sometimes we do conflict management as a training topic. And we go around China and say, hey, let's do conflict management. And everybody's it's very okay with that. And then we were in Malaysia and we tried to work with another training provider, say, hey, I think conflict management is a good topic. And we got a lot of pushback from our Malaysian partners to say that, conflict is a taboo topic of sorts in Malaysia, because it kind of signals that one of the two parties is hard to work with. That's why one of the two parties is the source of that conflict. So people, while there are conflicts and while people agree that we need to address the conflict, but we don't want to make it so obvious to say that, hey, there is conflict. So those are those subtleties in the different countries in that selling. And it was surprising to find out that there are a lot of commonalities between China with the West than between China with Southeast Asia, culturally wise, sales wise, because China is really more straight talking, direct, as compared to Southeast Asia.
Wow, that is a good sharing there. I can see that. I've had clients from China on the call say, just tell me how much. That's the way they speak. So yeah, you also in the beginning of this interview we talked about the sales map, right? So you share with us as well,
Right.
what is the sales map?
Right. So there are, like what I mentioned about NLP to sell. Some people use DISC as an assessment to find selling styles and all that. So there are a lot of assessments on how you sell. What is your style? Are you strict to the point kind of person? Are you the relationship building person? Are you the detail driven person, technical person, and so on? So that's selling styles. But what we found is, on the other hand, and there are a few other scenario-based sales assessments before us as well. There are different stories whereby it's not about the style, the way you sell, but how do you handle different sales situations. And that is what we went about to think that, what about we put different scenarios that are pretty much common. And now we just want to find out how the different salespeople respond to those different scenarios, and if there are better ways than other ways to handle them. So we created scenarios. We invited so-called sales experts, people who are in sales for like donkey years, many years, and we try to make it as multicultural as possible. So we've got American salespeople or sales trainers who are based in Singapore, so they know the American story and they have been in Singapore like for many years. We've got Americans who are based in Chinese American who speaks the language, who are based in China again for many years. So it's got both ends of the story. We've got people who are based. Well, we got Chinese people who are some Chinese salespeople who are based in Germany, and so on. So there are different levels of experts in a myriad of industries, from manufacturing to IT to financial services. And so on, and who are being trained in different schools of thought. So people who are trained in spin selling or master trainers in spin selling, people who are master trainers in Miller Hyman's strategic selling, and so on. So we got a roja of different experienced people in there. Give them a bunch of questions, get them to answer, and see if there are any correlations. So questions that have overly diverse points of view from all these experts, that we just threw them out because we couldn't decide what is a good way. And we finally nailed down to about 33 questions. So things like, you made an appointment with the customer, and while you went there and then you waited for 1 full hour before the customer came out. And when the customer came out, the customer says, "Hey, sorry, just now my meeting overran, and now I only have 5 minutes with you, and then I'll need to go for the next meeting." What would you do then? Right, so that's it's the kind of that's very specific scenario, and I wouldn't be letting the bag out of the cat out of the bag. It's part of the assessment, and one thing a no is to try to squeeze everything you have in that 5 minutes, because it's just not effective. You may want to find other ways to work around, but definitely to try to squeeze everything you want to say in that 5 minutes, it's not productive, right? So there are various scenarios split across 4 segments, 4 phases of sales: how you prospect and how you prepare, how you meet up with the customer, so it's questioning and presenting, how you follow through, and how you negotiate and arrange for objections handling.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, CJ. Yeah, that sounds interesting. And being someone in sales, I perfectly understand the different scenarios as well that will appear. So yeah, thank you so much for being on the pod. So what's next for you, CJ? Are you focused on training in China or training in Asia? What is it?
Yeah, well, China definitely is still our bread and butter, still our cash cow, so to speak. We have been there, and the leads just keep on channeling to us. We are lucky that this year is, I mean, we probably read in the reports that China is not really doing well economically, but the demand for sales training in China is still there because of the weaker economic results. So we're recovered, and now we are. Since I'm in Singapore, I'm also working with various partners to see who else we can work with to develop more business in Asia or Asia outside of China.
Thank you, CJ. Thank you for being on the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon podcast. So I actually connected with CJ on LinkedIn. So please connect with him, CJ Ng,
Yes.
actually on LinkedIn. And can you say your Chinese name as well at the end of your name?
Okay, well, so just comments. My Chinese in Pinyin is Huang Changjie, right? So it's Huang Ye, right? So the because Hokkien, so that's why the in the family name, and people in China just wonder why is it NG and it's Huang.
All right, yeah. Here in Malaysia and in Singapore, Huang is the surname is Ng.
Yeah,
So thank you so much, CJ, and thank you everyone for listening as well.
pleasure.